All right, welcome. We are going to be making our bell now. If you are taking this in class, then there's going to be a little bit of repeat. I wanted to film the video so that I could put it up online, and I didn't want to have to do two versions, so bear with me. We're going to start with a slip knot on our hook. The way I make my slip knot is I have the short tail in my hand, I wrap the yarn around my fingers, and then I just kind of keep going, and I pull the little loop through what's on my fingers. So let's do that again. I wrap it around, and then I just keep going with the tail. I bring it through that loop that's on my fingers and pull. Hopefully you can see that. And then I just tighten the long end, slip my hook onto there and tighten a little bit more. So with the slip knot on our hook, we are going to chain 2. So to chain, we're going to yarn over and pull that loop through the loop that's on our hook, I guess. Yarn over, pull again. So we've got 2 chains. Now we are going to put 4 single crochets into this chain. Now the instructions say to put 4 single crochets into the second chain from your hook. So this loop on your hook doesn't count. So that's your first chain and that's your second chain, which is essentially the very first chain you made. So to make a single crochet, we're going to insert our hook, yarn over, pull up a loop. We've got 2 loops on our hook, yarn over, pull through both those loops. And we're going to do that again 3 more times. Insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through those 2 loops on our hook. Insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through both loops. So we've got 3, 1, 2, 3, 1 more. And don't worry about this little tail. We're gonna weave him in later. So now I've got the 4, and you can see it kind of curves around. Don't you worry about that. We are gonna chain 1 and we're gonna turn so that now our curve is kind of on the top, and we're gonna keep working stitches around this way. We are going to put 2 single crochets into the first stitch. So right into that first stitch, we're going to put 2 single crochets, 1, 2, and then we're going to put 1 single crochet into the next 2 stitches. 1 in there, 1 into the next one, and you're going under both V's of your single crochets, remember? And then into your last stitch, you are going to put 2 single crochets. Now, it might be a little tough to get into. That first stitch is typically, well, the last stitch on this row, but the first stitch that you made in the previous row is typically tighter. So now you should have 6 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we're going to chain 1 and turn, and we're going to repeat. No, we're not. We are going to put a single crochet into every stitch across. So you're just going to put 1 single crochet into each stitch. So your stitch count remains at 6. So that's what you should have right now. And we are going to repeat that one more time. Chain 1, turn, and then put 1 single crochet into each stitch all the way across. So your stitch count, it remains at 6. Now we're going to do another increase. So I've got my 6 stitches, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to chain 1 and turn. And just like we did on row 2, my increases are going to go in the first stitch and the last stitch. So I'm going to put 2 single crochets into this first stitch. For the next 4 stitches, I'm just going to put 1 single crochet. 2, 3 and 4, and then in my last stitch I am going to put 2 single crochets. So now my stitch count should be 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Perfect. Chain 1, turn, and now we're just going to put a single crochet in each stitch. We're going to do this for 2 rows. So go ahead and put 1 single crochet into each of the 8 stitches, chain 1, turn, 1 single crochet into each of the 8 stitches. So you should have 2 rows with 8 single crochets. Okay, I've got all the way to my last stitch. So I've just done 2 rows with 8 single crochets. Now I'm ready for my next increase. So I'm going to chain 1 and turn, and we're going to increase in the same manner. So the first stitch and the last stitch each get 2 single crochets, and the other ones just get 1. So at the end of this row you should have 10 single crochets. So 2 go in the first one, and then we do the next 6 stitches with just 1 single crochet in each. 3, 4, and then in my last stitch I'm going to put 2 single crochets. Chain 1 and turn, and then we're going to repeat what we did 2 rows before. We're going to put 2 rows of 1 single crochet in each stitch. So we just had 10 stitches. We ended up with 10 stitches. We're going to do 2 rows of 10 single crochets. Okay, I'm at my last single crochet. So I've done my 2 rows of 10 single crochets, and I'm ready for my next increase. So chain 1 and turn, and we're going to increase in the same manner. So 2 single crochets in the first stitch, 1 single crochet in the 8 stitches in between, 2 single crochets in the last stitch, and at the end of it you should end up with 12 single crochets. So that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then 2 in my last stitch for 11 and 12. So you can see our bell is starting to take shape. All right, where are we at? We are at row 12. So we're going to chain 1 and turn our work, and we're going to do another increase. So 2 single crochets in that first stitch, 1, 2, 1 single crochet in the 10 stitches in between, and then 2 in the last one. So at the end of this row you should have 14 stitches. So I'm just getting up to my last stitch. I'm going to add 2 single crochets into my last stitch. And that's where we're at. We should have 14 stitches across. All right, row 13. We're going to do 1 more increase. So in the same manner, we're going to put 2 single crochets into this first stitch here. 1, 2. A single crochet into each stitch until the very last one, and then 2 in the very last one. And at the end of this row, you should have 16 single crochets. And yes, I have managed to get a fly in my craft room. I apologize for the buzzing. Okay, I've got 16. Let's just triple count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Perfect. So we are on row 14, which is the last row of the bell, and then we start doing some finishing and shaping and all that kind of stuff. So the last row, we're just going to chain 1, turn, and we're going to put 1 single crochet in each stitch all the way across. And when you get to the end, don't turn. So just put 1 single crochet in each stitch all the way across. I'll meet you at the end, and we will do the little finishing around the edge. So now we're ready to do our edging work, and I wanted to show you where we're going to put our stitches. So we're going to be working along the edge of the bell and basically putting single crochets at the end of each row. We're not going to chain 1 here. We're just going to put, if I get my tail out of the way, this is where my single crochet is currently attached is the wrong word, but that's where it's where we put it, that gap right there. So we're gonna not chain, and we're just gonna put another single crochet basically right in that gap, kind of swinging it around. And then at the end of this next row, we've got kind of a bigger gap there. That's where we had an increase. We're going to put 2 single crochets in there. And then we're just going to put 1 single crochet at the end of each row, even the ones that had the increase and have a slightly bigger gap. We're just going to put 1 single crochet in each of those. So let's get started. So I'm not going to chain. I'm just going to kind of go right back into that same hole that I was in and put another single crochet, but I'm going to kind of swing it around the corner of the bell. Into that next gap, we're going to put 2 single crochets. So keep kind of swinging it around. And we're trying to make that nice round bell shape that you get on bells, shockingly. Into the end of the next row, we're going to put a single crochet, and then we're going to keep doing that all the way up the side of the bell. 1 single crochet into the end of each row. So sometimes the rows will have really big gaps, and sometimes they won't. But just kind of pull apart your work, go slowly, and make sure you're hitting the end of each row. Okay, there's 1 more, and then we are basically up where we have our tail, and that's our beginning chain 2 where we put 4 single crochets. So into that space, and I'm just going to tuck my tail behind, into that space I'm going to put 3 single crochets. So this will help sort of bring it around and curve the top of the bell. And then we're going to continue back down the other side in the same manner. So 1 single crochet into the end of each row. And just go slowly, find your little gaps, pull it apart, find the next one. You just want 1 single crochet in the end of all of these rows until we get down to that second to last row. And then we're going to repeat what we did on the other side and put 2 single crochets. So we're almost there. In fact, are we there? We are there. So I've got 2 rows left. I've got right there and right there. So I'm going to put 2 single crochets in this next row. Whoops. 1, 2, and then 1 in this last row. And now we're back at the bottom. I don't need to do a single crochet row across, so I'm just going to slip stitch into that, and you can finish off. So by finishing off, what we mean is I'm going to cut my yarn. I've slip stitched into the first stitch of that row. I'm just going to do a little chain one and pull it out and tighten it. And there we have got 1/2 of our bell. So let's make one more of these. When you make your second one, don't finish or don't tie off the end here. And we'll use that yarn to attach everything together. So make one more half and meet me back. I have now got 2 matching bell sides. So we are going to put them wrong sides together. To find your wrong side, if you look at your bell, this is the right side, and you'll see how the single crochets, they just come neatly out the side. You've got this little ridge. It's all very flat. And then if you flip it over, you see how they kind of curve as if they want to go towards the front? That's your back side. So this is your front side where they're all very flat, and then you've got this neat ridge of right where the V stitches are. And this is your back side where they sort of curve away from you. Hopefully you guys can see the difference there. So we're going to put our wrong sides together. I'm not going to worry about my tails. They can just go inside and be included with the stuffing. And we're going to sew, well, we're going to crochet all the way around the outside. And then we're going to stuff, and we're going to come across the bottom. Okay, if you want, you can use some stitch markers to keep these together. So what I would suggest, we're going to start at this corner, and we're going to come up to the top. At the top, in the very top where you put your 3 single crochets, we are going to make a loop from the middle one. So put your stitch marker into the middle one. So I've got 1, 2, 3. So that's my middle single crochet. And then I'm going to find it on the other side. I've got 1, 2, 3. So that's my middle single crochet. Hopefully when I sew these together, they will match. And now we're going to come over to this other corner, and that stitch right before where I fastened off the first bell I made, I'm going to slip my stitch marker in there, and then I'm going to come over to the corresponding stitch on that side. And now we are ready to sew this together. I'm going to get my hook back on. Now, when we made our first side, oopsies, we slip stitched into that bottom stitch. I'm not actually going to do that this time. It'll get caught when we come around and sew. So I'm going to chain 1, and I'm going to turn, and then I'm going to find that stitch, last stitch on the side there, put my hook through, and then right where I made my slip stitch, put my hook in there, yarn over, pull up a loop, make my first single crochet. Now I'm going to go to the next stitch, put my hook through, find the next stitch behind, put my hook through that, make a single crochet. And I'm going to keep doing that all the way up the side of my bell until I get to my stitch marker. So keep doing that. When you get to your stitch marker, we will meet up again, and I'll show you how to make the hanging loop. Okay, I've just got 2 stitches left before where my stitch marker is. So we're just going to finish this off together. It's 1, and then one last stitch, and then my next stitch is where my stitch marker is. So I'm going to take my stitch marker out. I am going to slip into that stitch, just slip stitch into it. Now I'm going to chain 12. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If you do not want to have a yarn hanging loop like this guy, then skip this step and just keep single crocheting around. So now I'm going to come back right where I slip stitched, and I'm going to slip stitch again right in that same spot. And then I can keep going into my next stitch and do my single crochets and keep going all the way around until we get to the next corner, and I will meet you there. Okay, I've just got a couple more stitches to go, and when you get to the corner, don't fasten off. So that's my last it's my last stitch, except for where I slip stitched. So yeah, I'm just gonna leave that there. Don't fasten off. We're gonna stuff first. So grab your stuffing. And my yarn tails from the top of my bell are in there. They're nice and secure. Just get your stuffing in. And then we're going to start sewing across the bottom, and we can add a little bit more stuffing once we get to the other side. Before we start crocheting across the bottom, let's find our midpoint, because we want to add our little puff stitch at the midpoint. So we should have 16 stitches. 16, which is an even number, so there's no real midpoint. So what we're going to do is count 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I'm actually going to put my stitch marker in through 8 and then back out through 9. So it's clipped between the stitches, and we'll put our puff stitch there. Okay, let's start crocheting across the bottom. I'm going to tuck that yarn tail in as well. And just like we did down the side, we're just going to grab one stitch from one side, corresponding stitch from the other. Oops. And do our single crochet. So just go slowly. You don't want the stuffing to fall out. You want to make sure you catch every stitch. I have worked up to where my stitch marker is. I'm going to leave that stitch marker in place because I need it for knowing where to put my puff stitch after I'm done. But I'm just going to single crochet around, and I realize I just got a bit of stuffing. So push down on your stuffing, try and get that out of the way. I don't want to go back into same stitch. and just keep going. So just kind of ignore where that stitch marker is. We'll deal with it after we've finished sewing across. So now when you get to this point, oops, I just split my yarn, hang on. Take a look at your bell. Does it feel stuffed enough? Maybe move the stuffing around. If you feel like you need a little more, this is your chance before we sew it up completely. Okay? And then just continue on all the way across the bottom. And then when you get to the end, you can just fasten off and we will weave in that end. Whoops, I did not catch both. There we go. Okay, I've got one more stitch. And then I'm back at my beginning. So I am going to slip stitch into that very first single crochet. And then I can fasten off. And that is what our bell is looking like right now. So take a moment to weave in this end, and then we will deal with the puff stitch and adding the bell. For the bell addition, I'm going to give you guys two options. I'm going to go through how to do the puff stitch, but if you do not want to do the puff stitch, all you need to do is sew the bell on where you have put your stitch marker. So I have a little bit of stuffing coming out, but right here we put the stitch marker in between the 8th and the 9th stitch on the row beneath where we joined. So you just kind of have to go up and find that join in between your 8th and 9th stitch along the bottom edge there, and that's where you would sew in your bell. And to do that, my bells, and if you are taking this in class, these are the bells you're going to be using. My yarn needle goes right through my bell, so that's not a problem. If you are doing this at home, just make sure that your yarn needle fits through the bell. So I'm just going to attach my yarn to my yarn needle, find that join area, and very simply attach my bell. Now I am going to go kind of around this stitch, being careful not to snag my bell. Now it is still loose on this side, so we will deal with that in a minute. But you just kind of have to go around a couple of times to secure that end of the yarn. Go back through your bell. Now, can you see this? Let's see if I can. I need like a third hand right now. My yarn is coming. So my yarn tail is at the top here. So I want to go back through my bell, but I want to kind of do it this way, where we're crossing, and then, whoops, touched it. Just tighten it, and you can just tie a couple of knots. I'm not going to finish this off because I want to put a puff stitch right there, but just tie a couple of knots, weave in your ends, and then you have your bell attached. All right, so I'm just going to take this out, and then I will show you how to do the puff stitch. All right, let's show you how to put a puff stitch on. We're going to start with a slip knot on our hook. And then, like I said, when I showed you how to just sew the bell on, we are going to use stitch number 8 and stitch number 9 to attach our puff stitch. So with a slip knot on my hook, I am going to put my hook in to stitch number 8, Make sure we are in focus. And I'm just gonna slip stitch to attach it. All right, now to create the puff stitch, I'm gonna tug up on my chain a little bit just to give it a little bit of space. I'm gonna yarn over, I'm gonna insert my hook into that stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop. I've got 3 loops on my hook, and I'm just gonna give him a bit of a tug. I want to have lots of space here because I'm going to be drawing my hook all the way through all the loops in a minute. So I want to make sure I have lots of space. So now we're going to yarn over again. And I like to just kind of use my finger to grab it and hang on to it while I'm inserting and yarning over. So I'm going to insert my hook into the next stitch. So stitch number 9, yarn over and pull up a loop. So now I've got 5 loops on my hook. And again, I'm just going to give them a bit of a tug. I'm going to yarn over and I'm going to pull through all 5 loops. And you might have to wiggle it through a little bit. If you have resistance, which I felt I had, that meant I had a little bit of a split. So I just corrected that. And now I'm going to chain 1, and that secures my puff stitch. And then I'm going to cut a yarn tail that is about 8 inches long. Pull my hook out, and there you see I've got my puff stitch. I can take my stitch marker out now. This tail we're going to weave in. This tail we're going to use to attach our bell. So I'm going to put my yarn onto a yarn needle, thread it through my bell, and I'm going to snug my bell right up to the top there, and trying to work in behind so that the bell and the puff stitch are to the front of the work, and not sort of falling behind. So I'm going to turn my bell, my whole ornament over, and I am going to just kind of find a place to sew in this bell. And I know that's like incredibly specific. Now I can go back through my bell loop and catch some yarn. Sorry, this is awkward to do on camera. Back through the bell loop, catch some yarn, and just kind of secure it again into that puff stitch. I can bring my needle all the way down into the single crochet row and just straighten it out. Before I secure my ends, I'm just going to make sure that I like the way it looks. I do. So now I can weave in this back tail end. If you want to go a couple more times to secure your bell, you go right ahead. I'm fairly confident that it's not going to move, so I'm just going to weave my ends in a little bit, and then we can deal with that front end. So I can trim that. And now we can weave in this other tail. And like before, I'm going to try and pull that tail to the back of my ornament, because I don't want it to I don't want it to be obvious on the front. So I'm just going to give it a bit of a tug. I'm going to sew it in, pull it all the way across, give it another tug, make sure it looks straight at the front. I got to deal with my stuffing that's poking out, but I can deal with that later. In fact, my slip stitch is probably going to cover that, so, and we will get to that in a minute. So we'll just finish weaving this bit in. Whoops, lost my yarn. And that's where we're at so far. So now we have 2 more steps to do. We've got this decorative, what they call surface slip stitching to attach, and then a little bit of ribbon, which is really just tied on there. So for the surface slip stitch, we're going to get your white yarn. So surface slip stitching is not hard, but it's takes a little bit of getting used to. So we're going to go through this slowly. We're going to start with a slip knot on our hook, and if you are a very tight crocheter, it might be beneficial to go down a hook size. That will help you get through the crochets and the holes and everything in your project easier than the 4.5 that we're using. I'm going to stick with the 4.5, but if you feel you need to go down a size, then do so. Okay, slip knot on our hook. Now, the important thing to remember when you're surface slip stitching is that your working yarn needs to always be sort of in front of you on the work. First, we're going to attach it. So I am going to attach my yarn up near the top, and here where we added the yarn loop, there's a whole lot of slip knots. I'm going to attach my yarn to the one side. I'm going to try and bring it over all the way to the other side and just kind of skip all those slip knots. And I'm just going to pull that through and slip stitch just to attach my yarn. And the reason I'm kind of skipping all those slip knots is because they would be hard to work into, basically. Okay, now I can keep going. And the trick is you go back into the stitch where you just came out of, and then come up into the next one. Grab your yarn, pull it through very carefully. Sometimes it doesn't want to cooperate. Oh my goodness. Okay. Come on, we can do this. This is where smaller hooks are handy. And then slip stitch. Just try and keep that short tail out of the way. And then you go back into the hole you came out of, and then you find the next space. It's not an exact science. You're really just looking for spaces that you can work into, and slip stitch. And then you keep going. Always inserting in the same hole that your yarn is coming out of. And you're just going to work your way all the way around the perimeter of your bell. And you see how we're getting this kind of chained effect. That's what you're looking for. So insert where your yarn is coming out of, come out in the next space, grab your yarn and pull through. So keep working that all the way around, and then when you get to the top, you can fasten off and weave in your ends. And I'll show you how I would weave them in when we get there. I have worked basically almost back to the beginning, so I'm just going to put in one last stitch. And then just basically slip stitch into your starting chain there, and then we can fasten off. Oops. Okay, so that is approximately what you should be looking at for your ornament. Now, I just realized, because I have these bits of yarn here, you can just make a yarn bow instead of attaching ribbon if you want. I'm gonna weave these in and attach the ribbon because that's what we had originally. So, and for me to weave these in, I'm super lazy. I am just going to tuck them inside where all the stuffing is. Sort of shove it way down, have my needle come out towards the bottom, and then if you tug on the yarn and sort of push the stuffing in as you're doing it and cut the yarn really close, it completely disappears. And I'm going to do that with this one, because ain't nobody gonna see this. Okay, so just kind of tug it, make it look good, and now we can attach a little bit of ribbon. And I used my yarn needle just to get it through from front to back, and I basically just very simply went from front to back with my yarn needle. She says very simply, and then it won't come through. Take my needle off. So now my ribbon is sort of halfway on either side, if that makes sense. And then just tie a bow. I am not an expert bow tire by any stretch of the imagination. So I'm not going to give you instructions on how to tie a bow because, well, mine are very rudimentary. So if you know how to tie a fancy bow, you go right ahead. I'm just going to tie a real simple bow. Cut my tails off. Oops. I need sharper scissors. And there we go. Our ornament is finished. So I hope you have enjoyed this class. We've got a tree, you've got a bell, and hopefully you had some fun using your new crochet skills, and we look forward to teaching you more in the future.